The chamber of the Galactic Council, vast and cold, had seen war declared, planets condemned, and civilizations erased without a flicker of emotion. But when the human diplomat stood, his voice didn't beg. It burned. "You attacked our home," he said. Not screamed, declared. And in that moment, the galaxy remembered what humans were capable of when they bled. His council chamber was cold, not in temperature, but in presence. Walls of obsidian shimmered with ambient light, a soft hum of ancient machinery the only sound. Delegates from 500 civilizations surrounded the center platform, their expressions unreadable behind scales, masks, and neural veils. This was the Galactic Council. Its word had shattered empires, outlawed planets, and erased cultures with a single vote. And in the middle of it stood one man. Elias Rain adjusted the collar of his plain diplomatic suit. No medals. No rank. Just a small emblem over his heart, the insignia of the Terran Union. Behind him, the chamber's high walls loomed like cliffs, closing in. The speaker, a moss-colored entity with frilled eye stalks, broke the silence. "Ambassador Rain, you've requested emergency redress. Please state your grievance." His voice was steady, measured, controlled. 3 weeks ago, the human colony of New Thessalonica was annihilated. All 38 cities. Civilian population. Infrastructure. Agricultural domes. Gone. A ripple passed through the chamber. Not shock, just motion. Calculations. Adjustments. Rain continued. Council satellite logs captured the incursion. I've transmitted that data to each of you. A pause. Every delegate's neural screen lit with footage. A crescent-shaped planet beneath fire. Orbital flashes. The distant screams of broadband emergency signals. A delegate from the Raltec Syndicate, his voice like gravel soaked in oil, leaned forward. Our sources indicate that was a fringe world. Barely a core settlement. No formal defense grid. A resource outpost at best. Rain didn't blink. You say it wasn't a home. Another voice, metallic and amused, crackled from a Scarvian war envoy. You humans attach strange sentiment to dirt. Colonies fail. Resources are raided. This is the natural order of an expanding species. He stepped closer to the center dais. His voice sharpened, not with volume, but gravity. You're missing something. The council chamber dimmed. From Rain's wrist, a silver disc expanded into a holographic projection. A city street. Children in evacuation pods. Emergency lights flashing in red and orange hues. Then impact. Screams. The screen froze mid-frame, a mother reaching out through fire. You didn't strike a facility, Rain said. You slaughtered families. The silence was a blade. Tight. Unyielding. The speaker shifted uncomfortably. Ambassador Rain, the Council has protocols for investigation. If this was a mistake. There was no mistake. He stepped forward again. We found wreckage. Plasma signatures. We traced the ship IDs. 6 belonged to a privateer fleet under contract with Raltec. The rest, Council-aligned mercenary units. Another ripple. This time, unease. The Varnathi delegate, cloaked in shimmering blue folds, interjected. Even if this mistake occurred, it was not sanctioned. The Council bears no direct liability for private actions. You greenlit their operations. You funded their expansion. You issued safe passage credentials to Council space. You enabled the destruction of a civilian colony. No rebuttal came. Only the electric tension of veiled eyes and calculating silence. Then Rain spoke words that cut deeper than any weapon. You attacked our home? His voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It dropped like iron. You may call it a fringe planet. You may label it non-essential. But to us, it was soil nurtured by sacrifice. It was dreams taking root. It was children learning their mother tongue under foreign stars. He stepped closer. One more pace. And now it's ash. Because you wanted to teach us a lesson. Because we wouldn't sit at the back of your galactic procession. The ISA delegate hissed through a flange translator. Do not threaten this council. I haven't made a threat. Rain paused. Then, almost gently, I'm offering you clarity. Behind him, the hologram shifted. Not children now, but coordinates. Dozens of systems. Council-aligned outposts, trade hubs, resource moons. Each blinked red. I'm not here to ask permission for retaliation. That choice is behind us. What I offer now is transparency. The speaker's voice wavered. Explain. We've deployed a response protocol, Rain said. Not conventional. Not sanctioned. But deeply human. Efficient. Quiet. Targeted. He looked each delegate in the eye, or what passed for one. You won't see fleets. You won't hear declarations. You'll wake up and realize your borders are wrong, your files erased, your weapons missing. From the shadows, the Scarvian delegate stood. If you engage in war, it's not war. Rain cut him off. War is two forces clashing. This is different. The chamber felt smaller now. Claustrophobic. This is the Terran Union not holding back. We've always fought restrained. We've tried to be like you, diplomatic, strategic, polite. That ends now. The silence cracked as murmurs spread. Nervous, hesitant. You pushed us to choose between mourning and fury. We chose both. And now your skies will darken not from ships, but from silence. Communications will vanish. Assets will dissolve. Your black markets, your hidden fleets, your backroom dealers, they'll disappear. Piece by piece. He turned slightly, letting the projection rotate behind him. A timeline. Events already underway. A world called Metrak 9, communications offline. Sarnas Station, artificial gravity failure. Realtek core vaults, access denied, internal AI compromised. We are not here to conquer, Rain said. We don't want your territories. We want your memory. We want you to remember that humanity doesn't beg when wrong. We don't plead. His voice dropped again. Cold now. We respond. The speaker sputtered. You violate every interstellar accord. You violated something older than any accord. He stared directly into the central lens of the chamber's live feed, broadcasting across council space. You desecrated our dead. A final pause. Then, with eerie calm, he tapped his wrist. The feed cut to static. Across half the galaxy, every council-aligned vessel received a simple message in Terran code. Phase 1 complete. Rain turned and began to walk away. He paused only once, his voice echoing across the room. This wasn't vengeance. It was a message. And then he left them, seated in their silence, surrounded by blinking warnings and the ghost of a truth they'd ignored until it came knocking, with a voice that didn't need to shout to shake the stars. They didn't send a fleet. No grand banners. No declarations of war. What they sent were coordinates. 7 of them. All encrypted, burned into the skin of one courier who didn't speak a word before collapsing at the edge of Persis' vault. Persis' vault was never on any map. It was buried under layers of disinformation and hollow stars. No one found it by chance. You were either summoned or you never returned. And on that day, the doors opened for one reason: vengeance needed a shape. They didn't call her by rank. Not anymore. Reva Kane had worn many titles, most of them stripped. She was the kind of person governments used, then erased. The kind they pretended never existed. But in the vault, her name was enough. Witchfire. The moment she read the coordinates, she didn't ask why. She simply turned to the armory crew and said, "Unchain the rage." The hallowed rage was a relic of guilt and paranoia. Powered by obsolete principles humanity had sworn never to use again. Ray cores loaded with subspace rupture rounds. Shields built from siphoned gravitational anomalies. Its AI was outlawed in every civilized system. But now, it breathed again, hungry, precise, and unburdened by morality. She walked the corridors like she'd never left. The crew assembled wasn't briefed. they were chosen. Every soldier had disappeared from the surface world for a reason. Assassins, saboteurs, tacticians, ghosts of wars no one remembered out loud. She didn't tell them what happened on New Thessalonica. She didn't have to. Destination 1, she said. Engage stealth protocols. No survivors. The rage slid into a slipstream, skipping through dimensions in bursts of distorted time. What emerged above the syndicate hub of Drenvar was not a warship. It was a weapon wrapped in vengeance. Drenvar was a trade node, legal on paper, but underneath it pulsed the real business. Mercenaries, war drones, trafficking routes, fuel for the monsters no empire ever admitted feeding. It was protected by layers of defense platforms and automated orbital cannons. None of it fired. Iris had already whispered its way into the systems. By the time Drenvar registered human presence, the rage was already inside their blind spot. Cloaked. Angry. Kane didn't order bombardment. That was too easy. Instead, she dispatched the Acheron teams, 8 squads designed for destabilization. They weren't there to kill everyone. Just the right ones. Command centers. Communications nodes. DNA registries. The rage surgically decapitated the entire hierarchy in 93 seconds. The last broadcast from Drenvar wasn't a scream. It was a question. Why are they only taking heads? Kane watched the feed from her command chair. Her voice was calm, clipped. Because names mean nothing to us. We're collecting memories. Next came the gas giant outpost of the Rex Null, where the Realtech had hidden their primary logistics AI. The human task force didn't fire a shot. They landed, transmitted a 12-word override sequence, and watched as the station turned inward. Every drone. Every turret. Every internal defense protocol reclassified its own builders as threats. It was a silent mutiny orchestrated by a code humans had buried in Realtech firmware 20 years ago, just in case. When questioned later, an anonymous Realtech survivor would describe it simply. We handed them the knife. They just waited for the right pulse to twist it. In every strike, no civilians were harmed. Every station was left intact enough to be recognized, but empty. Dead in the eyes. Files gone. Infrastructure crippled. Leaders vanished. It wasn't conquest. It was deletion. The council began to panic. Not outwardly, too proud for that, but behind closed doors, alarms rang. Meetings extended into sleepless nights. Delegates argued over jurisdiction, protocol, precedent. All the while, the hallowed rage kept moving. On the 5th target, they tried resistance. The Scarvian military deployed interceptors ahead of their mining fortress. 3 squadrons, boasting hyperwoven armor and particle lances. They never reached firing range. Witchfire released Ashwake, a device banned under 12 treaties. It didn't explode. It unraveled. Every ship's engine ignited its own core in reverse. There were no bodies. Only silence. She gave no speech. She didn't taunt or warn. The crew followed her without hesitation, because every one of them had a name they couldn't forget. Names written on scorched birth certificates. Names whispered in dreams, always followed by fire. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were retribution. The 7th and final target wasn't a station. It was a council facility. A black site hidden under the crust of a rogue moon. Off the grid. No official existence. It served one function, housing the warlords the council protected in secret. The kind who'd ordered the New Thessalonica strike, not in malice, but in calculation. To test Earth's limits. They learned them. The rage landed directly on the surface. Kane led the breach team herself. She didn't ask for surrender. She didn't issue commands. She simply walked through the corridors like a judgment, her team behind her in silence. One warlord, an insectoid hybrid named Celtran, dropped to his knees. Please, he rasped through broken mandibles. This wasn't personal. She didn't blink. That's the problem. No shot fired. Just a sound, flesh and metal meeting resolve. Her blade never slowed. Before they left, she burned one message into the wall in 6 languages. We remembered differently. Back aboard the Rage, as the last system went dark behind them, Kane opened the secure line. Rain's face appeared in the hologram. He didn't ask what was done. She didn't report numbers. "It's done," she said. "They'll try to spin it. Deny it. Reframe it. They already are," Rain said. She nodded once. "So we hit them again?" "No," he replied. "Now we show them what we did." She smiled, not with joy, but with precision. "Upload the footage." Rain's voice lowered. "Let them see what it looks like when Earth mourns the only way it knows how." And in that moment 7 systems burned quietly in the dark, not from fire, but from memory, reprogrammed by ghosts in human skin who never wanted revenge. Just closure. The council didn't sleep. It calculated, debated, and whispered in corners, but the tension was no longer strategic, it was personal. Entire sectors had gone dark. Syndicate resources had vanished. Leaders had simply stopped responding. And not once had Earth made a formal declaration. That's what frightened them most. The silence. Elias Rain stood in the diplomatic wing, arms behind his back, watching the chaos unfold through a transparent screen. The council chambers across the promenade were in full session, though no one had called for one. Rumors had done that on their own. Behind him, the assistant drone hovered quietly. "Sir, they've requested clarification." "They'll get it." He stepped forward, eyes narrowed. "But not the kind they're hoping for." The main doors opened without warning. Council guards flinched as Rain walked in, uninvited, unaccompanied, and unarmed. The speaker tried to maintain order. "Ambassador Rain, this is not your floor. That's about to change." He stepped onto the central platform, voice calm but sharp. "You've all asked the same question. What does Earth want?" The Varnathi representative leaned forward. "If this is retaliation, it's beyond disproportionate." "No. This isn't retaliation." Rain turned slowly, meeting every gaze that dared to meet his. "This is revelation." The lights dimmed as his wristband cast a projection across the air. Images flickered, clean, silent, brutal. One by one, they watched systems blink out. Dren Various Threx Null. The Scarvian Intercept Fleet, turned inside out. No sound. Just the clean, methodical erasure of power. Rain let it hang in the air before speaking again. "You're not looking at a war. You're looking at an answer. You struck our colony, not as an act of necessity, but of dominance. You wanted to remind us of our place. And in doing so, you reminded us who we are." The Scarvian delegate hissed. "You overstep. You play with forces you don't understand." Rain's voice didn't rise. "No, we understand perfectly. That's why we never used them before." He tapped again. New images, not violence, but recovery. Obelisks rising where warlords once ruled. Aid convoys arriving on worlds the Council had long ignored. Children being handed food by Terran officers. The Council expected fire, but Earth had brought fire and light. War and order. Destruction and rebuilding. On their terms. "Let me be clear," Rain continued. "We don't seek territory. We don't want tribute. We want acknowledgement. You built a council around fear and policy. We've built a response rooted in consequence." The speaker, voice cracking, said, "You bypassed every protocol, every law. And where was your law when our citizens died choking on smoke?" Rain's eyes flashed. "Where were your protocols when mercenaries with council tags bombarded schools and hydro farms? You mistake your delay for legitimacy. We just refuse to wait." The silence was brittle. "You've already lost ships, networks, leadership. But what you've truly lost is control. And you won't get it back." From the side, a delegate rose, quiet, slow, measured. Not one of the major powers. A species that had rarely spoken in 1,000 sessions. "You claim to act for justice. But justice isn't war." Rain looked at him and nodded once. "You're right. That's why we didn't go to war. We went to memory. He let that sink in. You think we want your fear. We don't. We want your respect. And you won't give it until you've paid the price for ignoring us. Another projection lit the room. 7 Council-aligned species. Each one had already requested dialogue with Earth. Not out of fear. Out of interest. Because Earth had done the unthinkable. They had struck the monsters, and then offered a hand to the shadows left behind. The room stirred. The momentum shifted. Even the speaker looked rattled. We've lived in your galaxy, Rain said, voice lower now, quieter. We followed your rules, spoke your language, wore your etiquette like armor. But the moment we bled, you called us unstable. Primitive. He turned again, slowly, deliberately. You were wrong. More than 50 delegates now watched not with disdain, but with something colder. Recognition. Rain smiled faintly. We didn't come to your council because we needed approval. We came to learn how to break it if we had to. And we've learned. The speaker tried once more. Then what do you offer now, if not surrender? A new war? No, Rain replied. A choice. He stepped forward and dropped a silver cube onto the table. It expanded into a treaty, clean, binding, legal. Not demands. Agreements. The Terran Accords. It didn't request the Council's blessing. It restructured the Council's operations on humanitarian response, security oversight, and war crimes tribunal leadership, with Earth at the helm. Rain pointed to it. You signed this, or you watched your galaxy turn against you. Not from Earth, but from within. Because the worlds you've ignored? We didn't. And now they remember who fed them, who defended them, who spoke when no one else did. The Varnathi stood again. This is blackmail. No, Rain said. This is the future. We're just letting you choose whether you're in it. He turned and began walking away, not waiting for votes or questions. Just as he reached the edge of the platform, he paused. One last thing, he said without looking back. If you ever target our people again, we won't come back here to talk. We'll come back to collect. And then he walked out, leaving the most powerful chamber in the galaxy buried in silence, surrounded by proof that the species they once called impulsive had become the one thing they never expected. Necessary. They expected Earth to stop. To declare victory, issue a statement, return to their sector and bask in the illusion of restored dignity. Instead, Earth vanished from the conversation. No ambassadors returned to the Council. No new ultimatums were sent. The screens went dark. The silence, once comforting, turned suffocating. In the outer systems, something shifted. Colonies once denied aid under bureaucratic technicalities now flew Terran banners, not in conquest, but in gratitude. Supply convoys arrived without fanfare. Infrastructure was rebuilt at impossible speed. Council-aligned observers arrived too late and too powerless to interfere. Every planet Earth touched came back online stronger, louder, and unafraid. The Council couldn't ignore the pattern. Every world aided by Earth had one thing in common: they had been forgotten. Left behind. Sacrificed for trade routes, border politics, or resource margins. Now they stood on their own, declaring their sovereignty under the Terran Accord. The Council's influence frayed not through battle but through erosion, strategic, precise, irreversible. In a hastily convened emergency summit, the speaker demanded action. Sanctions. Embargoes. Show of force. The chamber roared with plans and panic until one voice cut through like a scalpel. They're not waiting for us to react, said a Hreth delegate. They already moved on. Silence followed. No one argued. The truth hung above them like gravity. 3 days later, Rain returned, unannounced. He walked into the chamber, as if he'd never left. The guards didn't stop him. The delegates didn't look away. He stepped up to the platform with no preamble, no projection. Just words. The votes didn't matter. We knew that. The laws, the treaties, the procedures, those were tools, not foundations. You never cared about equity. You cared about order. Yours. He paused, letting the weight of his voice drag behind every sentence. And so we used your tools to dismantle your order. A delegate from the Karari bloc spoke cautious. And what order do you offer in its place? The kind that doesn't bury the weak in red tape, Rain answered. The kind where accountability isn't seasonal. The kind where children don't burn because someone signed the right exemption form. Another delegate scoffed, bitter. You make yourselves saviors, but you wage war without declaring it. You rewrite the rules mid-game. Rain nodded. Because the game was rigged. He stepped forward. Do you know what we found on those fringe worlds? Not anger. Not vengeance. Just despair. People who had accepted their place on the margins. You called them liabilities. We saw them as proof. Proof of what? The speaker asked. That your galaxy had grown too comfortable with forgetting. He tapped a small device. Across the chamber, a new stream of footage played, not of burning ships or collapsing stations, but of children playing in streets built by Terran engineers. Of clean water flowing where dust once ruled. Of solar shields powered by Terran tech protecting crops on worlds once abandoned. A nurse treating patients with Terran vaccines. A father weeping in gratitude beside a rebuilt home. This is our war, Rain said quietly. Not against species or systems. Against apathy. The delegates shifted again, but something had changed. The usual arrogance was brittle now. Rain's voice didn't ask for recognition. It assumed it. That was what unsettled them most. You think we're angry? That we struck because we were hurt? That we lashed out like children denied a place at the grown-up table? He shook his head. No. We've seen what you grown-ups do. We've seen the cost of your order. And we decided to stop paying it. The speaker leaned forward, desperate now. Then what's your demand, Rain? What do you want us to say? Nothing, Rain said. This was never about what we wanted you to say. It's about what we made you see. He turned to leave, then stopped. But if you need a word for what just happened, don't call it retaliation. Call it reckoning. As he walked out, the council didn't stop him. Not because they couldn't, but because they no longer believed they should. In orbit, the hallowed rage drifted, silent and fully powered. Witchfire waited, arms folded behind her back. The crew stood at ease, the air still but tense. Anything? She asked as Rain stepped onto the bridge. They're breaking faster than expected, he replied. She tilted her head. You think they'll bend? No, Rain said, looking through the viewport toward the stars. They'll splinter. And the pieces will come to us. One by one. He paused, then turned to her. Prepare Phase 3. She raised an eyebrow. I thought this was about balance. Stabilizing. Not more fire. It is, Rain replied. But the galaxy's watching now. We need to show them what strength looks like without cruelty. Witchfire considered him for a long moment. And if they test us again? He didn't hesitate. Then we remind them what we buried. In that moment, two things became clear. Earth hadn't just responded to an attack. It had evolved beyond diplomacy, beyond compliance, beyond fear. And whatever came next, whatever challenge the Council summoned to reassert control, they'd be facing a species that had found purpose in loss, and clarity in being underestimated. Not conquerors. Not victims. Just human. And this time, that was more than enough. The summit was over before it began. The Council hadn't called it, nor did it have the luxury of an agenda. They gathered out of instinct, huddled in a cold chamber with seats that once radiated dominance, now dulled by dread. No formal speaker opened the floor. There was no vote. Only waiting. Elias Rain entered without fanfare. He didn't look around, didn't bow, didn't slow. He walked with the gravity of someone who had outlived fear and found clarity in the ashes. Behind him, the projection pad lit up on its own, fed by a signal that no one authorized, no one could block. The screen showed a child standing at the foot of an obsidian monolith. No banners. No Terran flags. No symbols. Just smooth black stone rising into the air, with a single message etched across its face in hundreds of languages. You attacked our home. We remember. The child looked up, then reached out and touched the stone. The feed went dark. Rain's voice followed, not loud but impossible to talk over. We've placed one on every world you touched during the war. Every colony that was left to burn. Every station sold off as collateral damage. Every species you labeled collateral. A delegate from the outer reach shifted, unsure. So this is your final act? Memorials? No, Rain said, his tone unreadable. This is your warning. Another screen flickered on. Not war footage. Testimonies. Survivors from New Thessalonica. Elders from Clorin 4. A mother from Varantha's broken crescent. Their words weren't angry. They were patient. Cold. Clean. They remembered, and that was worse than rage. Rage burned out. Memory endured. The speaker cleared his throat. If you mean to shame us, Earth, you've succeeded. But this erosion of order, it leads nowhere. Rain turned slowly. That's the problem with your kind of order. It only worked when we were quiet. Murmurs spread across the delegates. Not outrage. Recognition. Earth hadn't silenced the Council. It had exposed it. Every operation since the Accord had been legal. Every strike tied back to a Council loophole. Every alliance struck with a signature from the very bodies that now trembled in their seats. You didn't just wake us up, Rain said. You reminded us that justice can't be deferred to a committee. The Varnathi diplomat rose, voice tight. You believe this ends with memory? With shame? You're building a legacy on martyrdom. No, Rain replied. We're building it on warning. He stepped forward, slowly. You're not afraid of us because we struck back. You're afraid because we didn't want your throne when we could have taken it. That's what breaks you. We don't need control. Just consequence. A long silence followed. No one challenged him. You declared that Earth had no place in the inner ring of civilization. We agreed. That's why we built our own. Another screen activated. Dozens of independent systems, once bound to the Council, now part of the Terran Accord. Not annexed, joined. Volunteer signatures. Open support. Coordinated development. It wasn't an empire. It was a network of the neglected, and it was growing. Rain's voice softened. We could have become the monsters you feared. Built weapons that unravel stars. Deployed fleets that devour light. But we didn't. A pause. Then lower. Because what scares you most isn't that we're violent. It's that we're principled. The Council chamber, once designed to intimidate, now felt small. We've issued no further demands. We've taken no spoils. We've even offered aid to those who stayed silent while our colonies burned. That's who we are. But make no mistake. He raised a finger, calm as ever. If it happens again, we won't respond with memory. We'll respond with erasure. Quiet. Absolute. Undeniable. No one moved. Even the guards outside the chamber stood still, as if afraid to breathe. Rain stepped back. This isn't a threat. It's a guarantee. Because we don't need another war. Just one rule. Another projection blinked on. Just 3 words. Never again anywhere. He didn't wait for applause or objections. He turned, walked toward the doors. And then he paused, one hand on the panel. I'll leave you with this, he said, his voice quieter than ever. We've been called many things. Fragile. Unruly. Dangerous. But after today, I hope you remember the one thing we never stopped being. He looked back once, eyes like winter. Human. Then he left. And the chamber, filled with the most powerful voices in the galaxy, said nothing at all.